You are on a third date. The person across from you is still attractive, still kind, still exactly the person you liked yesterday. Then they chase a rolling ping-pong ball in your imagination, and the whole room suddenly says no. English-speaking dating culture calls this the ick, a sudden feeling of repulsion towards someone you were attracted to a minute ago. Japan has a cousin in Contagion, but this episode stays close to the English slang ecosystem. A 2025 study found that 64% of single adults surveyed had felt the ick. 26% ended the relationship immediately. 42% ended it later. A childish word is hiding a very efficient rejection machine. The most useful twist is this. In coded TikTok examples, physical appearance was only about 6% of the triggers. The ick is less about someone being ugly than about the brain deciding a tiny behavior means too much. The word feels new because TikTok made it portable, but Merriam-Webster traces the romantic phrase to late 90s television and early 2000s dating comedy. The feeling is older than the platform. The speed is new. The internet tries to sort every turnoff into a red flag or a harmless quirk. The ick lives in the middle. It feels bodily and urgent, but the evidence is often absurdly small. Collison and colleagues frame the ick as a mate choice threshold. That phrase matters. It means people do not only differ in what triggers disgust, they differ in how quickly a trigger becomes a rejection. People high in other-oriented perfectionism hold others to stricter standards. In dating, a tiny awkward move can be treated like a full character report. The body says incompatible before the mind finishes reading. Narcissism in this research does not mean a cartoon villain. It means self-importance, entitlement, and a sharper eye for other people's defects. The ick can become a way of protecting the throne. Many reported icks are not about hygiene or beauty. They are about public embarrassment, moving strangely, speaking annoyingly, trying too hard, being too feminine, being too trendy. The fear is not just disgust. It is being seen beside it. Disgust is not one emotion with one job. Tybur, Lieberman, and Griskevicius describe three functional domains: pathogen disgust, sexual disgust, and moral disgust. The ick can borrow the sound of all three alarms. Pathogen disgust is the obvious one: chewing loudly, dirty nails, a smell, a sticky table. These cues are ancient because avoiding contamination was never a lifestyle preference. It was survival with a nose. Sexual disgust is stranger. It does not only ask whether someone is clean, it asks whether this person feels like a safe and appropriate sexual choice. One awkward cue can make the whole body step backward. Moral disgust enters when the trigger suggests cruelty, arrogance, misogyny, contempt, or disrespect. Being rude to a server is not a quirky ick. It is information about how power behaves when it feels comfortable. A sensitive disgust system has a logic: better to reject one safe option than accept one dangerous one. The cost is false positives. A nervous laugh can get processed as evidence. A harmless habit becomes a case file. That is why the 6% matters. If looks were the whole story, the ick would be simple shallowness. Instead, behavior and personality dominate the examples, which means interpretation is doing most of the work. The ick is the magnification of a cue: a sock, a phrase, a voice note, a dance move. The brain grabs one fragment and lets it stand for the whole person. Two people can watch the same behavior and feel opposite things. One sees charm, one sees danger, one sees nothing. The event is small, the threshold inside the observer is not. Dating apps make people legible before they make them lovable. Profiles are designed for comparison: height, job, politics, prompts, photos. Once a person is a tile, rejection can feel frictionless. Choice changes perception. When another profile is always one swipe away, the mind can treat discomfort as a sorting signal. The ick becomes a fast way to keep the conveyor moving. Finkel and colleagues warned that online dating systems can overpromise what matching can know. The awkward truth is that chemistry happens between bodies in time, not only between traits on a menu. TikTok did not invent sudden repulsion, but it did teach people the category. Once you have a label, you start scanning for examples. A private shiver becomes a public genre. The coded examples also reveal gender scripts. Some women reported icks around men seeming too feminine. Some men reported icks around women seeming too trendy. The body is not free of culture when it says no. This is why the phrase can feel unfair. The ick often arrives like a verdict without a trial. The person did not do something large enough to prosecute. Your nervous system simply refuses to continue. Diane Felmley's fatal attraction research explains one version. The trait that first attracted you can later become the trait that irritates you. Funny becomes unserious. Confident becomes arrogant. Different becomes embarrassing. Felmley found that extreme attractive traits were especially vulnerable to becoming disliked. Intensity sells well at the beginning because it makes someone memorable. Later, the same intensity sends invoices. This does not mean attraction was fake. It means early attraction edits. It crops out the boring, softens the risky, brightens the unique. The ick may be the moment the edit fails. Positive illusions are not just mistakes. Murray, Holmes, and Griffin showed that idealization can support relationships. Love often begins with a generous blur. The danger is confusing the blur for a permanent license. When the blur clears, ordinary details can feel like betrayal. Not because the person changed, but because the image got less cinematic. The frog was not transformed. The lighting changed. That is why Keruka Gensho is such a sharp cousin. The fairy tale promises a frog becoming a prince. The modern dating story is sometimes the reverse. A prince becomes a frog because desire cannot survive being answered. Sometimes the trigger is not a behavior at all. It is reciprocity. The moment someone likes you back, fantasy has to become relationship. The imagined person becomes a real person with needs, and the body panics. At a distance, attraction can be clean. Up close, it has texture, breath, timing, uncertainty, appetite, vulnerability. The ick can be an intimacy alarm disguised as taste. Many icks happen in public because public space adds witnesses. You are not only asking, do I want them? You are asking, can I be seen wanting them? That second question is crueler. Cringe is social contagion. Their awkwardness touches your self-image. The ick says, if I stand close to this, it will become part of me. A slang term is useful because it compresses experience. It is dangerous for the same reason. Once the label arrives, patience has to argue against a word that already feels finished. Then the group chat arrives. You describe the moment. Friends laugh. The ick becomes socially confirmed. What began as a bodily reaction becomes a tiny community decision. There is a compassionate possibility. Sometimes the ick protects distance. If closeness feels risky, the mind can convert fear into disgust because disgust is easier to obey than fear. The timing often exposes this. The ick can appear when things become official, when someone asks for a weekend away, when the relationship starts needing decisions. The body votes before the calendar does. Perfectionism gives avoidance a respectable costume. It says, I am not scared. My standards are high. Sometimes that is true. Sometimes the standard is a door-marked exit. Narcissistic sensitivity can make a partner feel like an accessory to the self. If they do something that threatens the image, disgust arrives as image management. The problem is that disgust feels certain even when its cause is uncertain. A body sensation does not come with a bibliography. It tells you leave. then lets you invent the reason. So the mature question is not whether the ick is real. It is real as a feeling. The question is whether the story attached to it is accurate. Sometimes the story is accurate. If the trigger is cruelty, coercion, contempt, racism, misogyny, or repeated disrespect, do not intellectualize your alarm into politeness. Some disgust is protection doing its job. But if the trigger is socks, jorts, Spotify ads, a harmless laugh, or the way someone carries a backpack, the feeling may deserve attention without deserving authority. The best advice from the newer research is not to ignore the ick. It is to take each one with a grain of salt. Sudden certainty is sometimes just speed wearing a judge's robe. Try splitting the moment in two. First, what actually happened? Second, what meaning did I attach to it? The ick usually lives in the second column, pretending to be the first. Then ask which alarm is speaking. Is this hygiene? Is this sexual mismatch? Is this moral concern? Naming the domain makes the reaction less mystical and sometimes less powerful. Ask whether the disliked thing is connected to what first charmed you. Their spontaneity became chaos. Their confidence became arrogance. Their innocence became immaturity. That pattern is old enough to have data. Ask what your imagination purchased. Did you love the person or the distance, the mystery or the human, the status or the body beside you in ordinary light? The market rewards fast exits. Relationship wisdom often requires slower evidence. Not endless chances, not self-betrayal, just enough time to tell signal from performance anxiety. If the feeling remains, you can leave without prosecuting the other person. Not every loss of attraction needs a moral case. Sometimes the kindest sentence is, "I do not want this," and that is enough. Return to the third date. The coffee is still warm. The person is still larger than the tiny cue your body selected. Maybe the cue matters, maybe it does not, but the cue is not the whole human. The goal is not to become someone with no icks. That would be unsafe and probably impossible. The goal is calibration, a rejection threshold sensitive enough to protect you and humble enough not to worship itself. The ick is not stupidity. It is not always wisdom. It is a fast, embodied signal from a brain trying to choose intimacy under modern conditions. Listen to it. Then ask it one more question. Claymind may have overthought this one, but if it made you think, please like, share, comment, and subscribe.